Hey everybody, how's it going? I'm Paul, I'm with the Dicey Review, and today we're going to be learning how to play the 2 to 5 player game Tech Race. In this game, you play as a new startup trying to revolutionize the automotive, healthcare, or energy industries. You're trying as best you can as the CEO to manage your payroll costs, market to the right customers, and expand into the right areas. And at the end of the game, the company or the player that has the most valuation points will be the winner. Now this is a crowdfunding prototype, so I'm going to do my normal component overview, but please note that all of the components that I show here in this video are subject to change and may look different in the final produced copy. Tech Race comes with all of the components that you see here, including 5 company boards, a double-sided game board, 1 market board. The game also comes with 6 CEO cards, 30 total policy cards, 5 sets of 2-sheet player aids, 60 total customer cubes, 15 tracker tokens, 7 award tiles, 15 total voting tiles, 5 100 tracker markers, a first player token, a round marker, 20 office tokens, 15 tech tokens, 60 total employee tokens, 54 total resource tokens, a supply of coins in different denominations, and 1 cloth bag. To begin setup, place the game board in the center of the table. Use the Siberia Prime side of the board for 2 or 3 players, and use the Cyber North side of the board for 4 or 5 players. In our example, we're setting up for a 2-player game, so we'll use this side of the board. Each player will then receive a player board, 3 tracker tokens, a set of tech tokens, a set of voting tiles, and if it would be helpful, each player can receive a set of player aids. Then each player will receive 1 CEO card. They can be picked or dealt randomly, and then these cards are placed in their play area. In a 4 and a 5 player game, players would then receive 4 offices. In a 2 or 3 player game, each player would only receive 3. So in our 2-player example, each player will get 3 offices. Then each player will take 1 of their tracker tokens and place it on the 20 space of the valuation track around the edge of the game board. Then place a starting number of customer cubes in each region, and the game recommends placing them all in the cloth bag and then drawing them randomly. The remaining customer cubes can be placed in a supply near the game board. Each region on the game board also features a number of spaces to place offices. Placing offices grants an immediate reward, and also other in-game benefits which we'll discuss later in the video. Players will also need to place the supply of coins near the play area, and then players will want to shuffle both the level 1 and level 2 policy decks, making sure to include the cards for the correct player count, in our example in this 2 to 3 player game, and not include any cards that are for a higher player count. Place the shuffled decks near the play area. Then place the market board near the game board. Place the round tracker on space 1 of the round track. Then randomly pick 3 award tiles and place them face up in the award zone on the market board. Then shuffle all the resource tokens and divide them into 3 face down piles next to the market board. You'll draw 5 random tokens and place them in the empty spaces for resources. Players will place their other tracker tokens in the cost section of their player board. This area tracks each player's payroll, and if it ever goes over 20, you can use a second tracker to indicate more than 20. Players will then place their tech tokens, the red, green, and yellow ones, in the corresponding starting position. Players will also need a supply of employee tokens near the play area. Players will then choose a start player. This can be done randomly. And beginning with the start player and then in clockwise order, each player will place 1 of their office markers on an empty office space, and they'll immediately receive the award specified on that office space. We'll go over these immediate rewards in detail a little later in the video. Each player will then also get a free tech upgrade to level 1, and they can indicate this by moving the associated tech marker on the appropriate track. First player would then be given 5 coins, and then every other player in turn order would receive 1 coin more. The first player marker would then be given to the second player, and you're ready to play. A game of Tech Race will last a maximum of 9 rounds, and in each round there will be 3 phases. In the first 2 rounds of the game, there will only be 2 phases, the staffing and action phase. The staffing phase can be completed simultaneously by all players, and then in the action phase, in turn order, players will use their employees to perform actions in any order they choose, and then after all their actions have been completed, the next player will use their employees to take actions. After all actions have been completed in the action phase, employees' salaries will have to be paid, and then players will just move to the next round. At the beginning of each staffing phase, each player will receive 2 employee tokens. Each player will have a minimum of 2 hiring or training actions each round, and they can gain more by hiring HR officers or training office managers. Using your employee tokens, you can hire any level 1 employee if you want. Level 1 employees can be determined by looking at their salary. Any level 1 employee will have a salary of 1 coin. You can indicate that an employee is hired by placing your token on that employee's section on the player board. It's also important to note that you can hire more than one of the same employee if you'd like, and you don't have to use all of your employee tokens each round, but if you don't use the tokens, they'll go away at the end of the staffing phase. And once hired, the employees will stay on your player board unless you fire them to reduce payroll costs. At any point during the staffing phase, an employee can be fired by having its token removed from the board, and this would reduce your payroll costs that you would have to pay at the end of each round. As you hire employees during the staffing phase throughout the game, you can move your tracker to indicate your current payroll costs so you'll know what you have to pay at the end of each round. For instance, at the end of this first round, you know that you'll have to pay 2 coins in payroll costs. Instead of hiring a new employee, you could train an employee to level 2. To do this, you have to discard 1 employee token and then move an existing employee token from the level 1 employee to a level 2 employee. For instance, you could train this sales rep into a sales manager. The only restriction is that you can't train an employee into a level 2 employee in the same staffing phase that you've hired them. And when training an employee to a higher level, you'll notice that their payroll costs will increase, so you want to make sure to track that accurately as you train employees. After all players have completed the staffing phase, it's then time to move into the action phase. Beginning with the start player, and then going in clockwise order, each player will fully complete their action phase. To do this, players will turn over their employee tokens in any order they choose from the blue to the gray side to indicate that each employee's action has been used for the round. Once all employee tokens have been flipped over, it will then be the next player's turn in turn order to complete their action phase. Each employee on a player's board has a different associated action that we'll look at in detail now. When you use a finance officer, you can either gain 2 coins or gain 1 valuation point. When you use a marketing officer's action, you can add 2 new customer cubes to any region of the board. You can add these cubes to different regions if you'd like, and you don't have to have an office there to do this. Using a sales rep's action will allow you to gain 1 customer cube from an associated region where you have an office. You have to have an office to gain a customer, and in addition to that, you can only gain customers that match the industry interests where you have at least a level 1 technology. So for instance, since the gray player has a level 1 technology in the energy sector, they could gain customers that are interested in energy, represented by green cubes. Once again, they can only gain a customer in an area where they currently have an office. In this example, since the player has an office in this region here, they would be able to gain 1 of these green cubes and place them on their player board. Players can only serve a number of customers equal to the capacity that their engineers give them. A level 1 engineer will allow a player to hold up to 2 customers in their revenue zone in the first column. When a sales rep acquires a new customer, they can be placed directly into the revenue zone if the player has enough engineers to hold those customers in that zone. It's also important to note that customers can only be placed in the first column of your revenue zone unless you've unlocked higher levels of technology. So for instance, if a player has unlocked the 2nd level of energy technology, they could then serve customers in this 2nd column, which would gain them more revenue each round. When a player gains a customer, if they don't have any capacity to serve customers in the revenue section because they don't have an engineer or an engineering manager, the customers will instead go into this reserve area underneath the sales employees. This area can hold up to 4 potential customers. If a player would gain another customer and this area is already full and they don't have any capacity to serve customers in the revenue section, they're not able to gain more until they clear out this area. It is important to note that customers in this bench area can be poached by other sales managers. If a player activates a sales manager to take their action, they can either gain 2 customers from the board, following the same rules that they have to follow with their sales reps, or they can take 2 customers from their opponent's bench areas if they haven't been moved into the revenue section yet. It is important to note, however, that if you use a sales manager to steal customers from an opponent, you do still have to follow the rules of only taking customers that are interested in your technologies that have been unlocked. So for instance, this player could steal green customers from someone else, but they wouldn't be able to steal red or yellow customers because they haven't unlocked the technology to interest those customers yet. Also, you can only poach customers from players who have an office in the same region as you. If a player hires an engineer, this gives them the capacity to serve up to 2 customers in an industry where they've unlocked technology. So for instance, if a player had this employee, they could hold 2 customers in this revenue area. If an employee is able to train an engineering manager, that would increase their capacity to serve customers by 5. So if a player had this engineer and this engineering manager in their workforce, they could hold up to 7 customers that they can serve, assuming they've unlocked the technology to be able to attract them. Since this player now has a capacity to serve up to 7 customers, if they were to gain new customers from a sales lead, they could move those customers directly into the revenue area since they have room to serve them. Later in the game, if players upgrade a technology from level 1 to 2 or 2 to 3, they can immediately, if they want to, move customers that match that technology into the appropriate column of their revenue section immediately. Please note that each section in the revenue area can only hold a number of customers equal to the empty cube spaces. So for instance, this player would only be able to move 4 of their green customers because they already had 3 yellow customers in that area earlier. If a player uses the action of a research scientist, they can gain new resources and develop a tech if they want to. The research zone on a player board has 9 different technologies separated into 3 different categories: automotive, energy, and biotech. Players have to develop their technologies sequentially, meaning they have to start on level 1 and then go to level 2 and level 3, etc. And a player has to have a research scientist to develop a new technology. In addition to that, players would have to have the resources required to develop a technology. So for instance, to develop the self-driving car, players would have to have the 2 listed resources to be able to turn back into the supply, in addition to having the research scientist available to develop the tech. If a player uses their research scientist and has the available resources, they could turn those in and then develop that technology. When a player turns in resources to develop technologies, they'll go face up in a discard pile near the stacks of new resources. When a player activates a research scientist on their turn, they can also gain 2 new resources from the display. You can select the resources from the available 5 one at a time and flip over new resources as you select them to see if you want to grab the resource that just came out. For instance, this player could immediately take this new resource that was just revealed. And at any time during their turn, a player can choose to pay 3 coins to return all 5 resources to the supply and turn over 5 new ones. It's also important to note that you can also exchange or buy resource tokens from other players by making any type of agreement with that player. That includes not only giving them coins and resources, but also favors or collusion as well if you'd like. And at any time, if all of the resource tokens have been drawn from the stacks, you'll shuffle all of the resource tokens in the discard pile and place them back into face-down stacks. If you activate an HR officer, this employee would give you a new hiring token that you could use in a future round. You would gather that token and it would stay in your supply. If you were to utilize an office manager, you would gain an employee token just like with the HR officer, but in addition, you would be able to place one of your offices in a new region. Gaining these tokens would give you an additional hire or train action in a future round. When placing a new office, a player can select any empty office space showing an immediate bonus in any region where they aren't currently located with an office already. So for instance, the orange player could place an office in this zone or in this zone. And when placing an office, you will immediately get a reward. In this instance, you would get 3 points. In this instance, you would gain an extra hiring or training token. In this instance, you would gain 2 resources from the display. Here you would get 5 coins. Here you would get 2 coins, an extra resource, and once again, an extra token giving you a hiring or training action. And once again, you can only place an office in a location where you don't currently have one. So for instance, the orange player could place their new office in this location. This will also give the player access to new customers in this region, and you have access to those customers right away, even in the same round. And it's important to note that each player can only have 1 office per region. Players will need to keep their office manager to maintain their office in a location. If you would ever fire an office manager, you have to remove an office from the board and lose 10 valuation points. And now is a good time to talk about valuation points as you take actions and achieve things throughout the game. Players will gain points throughout the game by taking certain actions on their player board. Each time a player takes an action that would increase their valuation, they immediately move their tracker on the valuation track to reflect that. Players can gain points from using their finance officers, from developing new technologies. As you can see, developing a level 1 tech gives you 10 points, a level 2, 15, and a level 3 tech, 20 points. Each new office opened would give you 10 points, and being the first player to achieve one of the public awards would give you 10 points as well. Each player starts the game with 20 points because they start with an office and a level 1 tech. If any player is the first to complete one of the public awards, for instance, if a player was the first one to have 10 plus customers, they would take this tile and place it next to their player board to show that they've achieved it. There are a total of 7 potential awards that can be claimed, but only 3 will be face-up each game. After players have utilized all of the actions on their player board that they want to for the round, it will then be the next player's turn in clockwise order. Once all players have completed their turn during the round, it would be the end of the action phase, and you would have to pay all of the salaries for your employees. For instance, this player's payroll is currently 12 coins. It's important to remember that players will earn revenue from all of their served customers each round, which should help to pay for payroll costs. Players would return the payroll cost to their supply, and if they don't have enough to pay for a particular employee, the player would lose 5 valuation points and lose any employees that they're not able to pay for. After the first and second round, after the action phase is completed, you would simply move the round marker and begin a new round with the staffing phase. At the beginning of each round, starting in the third round, 3 lobbying cards from the appropriate deck will be turned face up and will then be voted on by the players. In rounds 3 to 5, policy cards are drawn from the period 1 deck, and from rounds 6 to 8, policy cards from the period 2 deck are drawn. Players can skip lobbying in the 9th round, or, if the final round is triggered earlier, by a player surpassing 100 points. Each policy will offer a different type of reward or benefit for the players, but how each policy will benefit each player might be different based on the player's strategy during the game. Policies can either be immediate benefits, end-of-game benefits, ongoing benefits, or benefits that occur when a specific condition has been met. Players will all choose their desired policy by secretly selecting a voting tile, 1, 2, or 3. Players can lobby for a particular policy that they want to pass by bidding for their selection. Players can, if they want, bid a certain amount of money with their bidding token. Players can also discuss their bids and collaborate with other players to win if they have a desired policy that they hope gets selected. All players would have to reveal their bidding tokens and the money that they've bid at the same time. For instance, the orange player could reveal their 3 token showing that they bid for policy number 3 and that they bid 1 coin. Players don't have to lobby, and if no players choose to lobby, no policy is selected. But if there's at least 1 player lobbying, the policy that has the highest total bid from all of the players would get selected. And if 2 or 3 policies are tied, the player who has the highest bid can pick the winning policy. But if more than 1 player has the highest bid, whoever went first in turn order would win the tie. It's also important to note that players can bid nothing if they want to, but after all players have paid any of their bid amounts to the bank, regardless of whether they lose or win the bid, the winning policy would then take effect. It might have an immediate benefit or an ongoing benefit, or only a benefit that would help players at the end of the game. The policies not chosen would be discarded. Players would continue to play until the 9th round, or until 1 player has achieved 100 valuation points. If the game end is triggered by someone achieving 100 points, after this happens, all other players who haven't had a turn that round would finish their turn, and then the winner would be the player with the most valuation points. Players would need to remember to score any end-of-game policies that are in effect, and also they would gain 2 points for every customer and 1 point for every 5 coins they have. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching our video. We hope that it was helpful and we hope that it was informative. If you still have any questions about how to play the game, please comment below or email me directly at thedicey@gmail.com, and I'll make sure to answer those questions for you if I can. And as always, if you're enjoying the content that we put out, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and click the bell icon to be notified whenever we put out new content in the future. Alright everybody, thanks so much for watching, and until next time, I'll see you at the table.